The phone rang with an urgency that sliced through the calm of my modest home office. Glancing at the unknown number on the screen, I hesitated but eventually answered. Claire Harmon speaking. Your daughter's wedding is starting. Hurry up and come. A gruff voice blurted out, sending a shiver down my spine. I think you have the wrong number. My daughter Ava is still in college, I replied, my voice steady despite the confusion swirling in my head. No mistake, Claire. It's me, Richard. Richard. The name alone was enough to stir a maelstrom of emotions within me. 15 years had passed since our bitter divorce, since he had callously abandoned Ava and me for his mistress. Now he was calling about a wedding? It had to be some sick joke. Richard, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? Just get here, White Garden Chapel, and hurry, he said, and the line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Ava, who had been studying in the living room, looked up, her eyes filled with concern. Mom, is everything okay? Just an old ghost, nothing to worry about, I said, forcing a smile. But inside, a storm was brewing. As I sat down, memories I had long buried began to resurface. 15 years ago, life was a picture-perfect portrait. A loving husband, a beautiful daughter, a comfortable home. But then Richard tore that portrait to shreds. I had been a part-time librarian back then, content with my quiet life. Richard, on the other hand, was poised to take over his family's lucrative business. We had never struggled financially, but that wasn't enough for him. The late nights, the weekend meetings, the growing distance, they were all signs I had chosen to ignore. Then came the day he coldly announced his affair and his plans to remarry. I've found someone else. We're having a child, he had said without a hint of remorse. The revelation shattered my world. But worse was yet to come. He left, leaving me with nothing but a broken heart and a mountain of questions. How could he? Why didn't I see it coming? The divorce was swift, his wealthy family ensuring he got off without a hitch. I was left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild a life for Ava and me from scratch. The years that followed were a blur of struggle and determination. I worked day and night, slowly climbing my way up from a part-time librarian to the owner of a thriving online bookstore. Ava grew into a bright, strong-willed college student, my pride and joy. We had come so far, yet Richard's call threatened to unravel everything. I was pulled from my thoughts by Ava's voice. Mom, who was that, really? It was your father, I said, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ava's expression hardened. What does he want after all these years? He mentioned a wedding. His, perhaps, but it doesn't matter. We have our own lives now. Ava nodded, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. Richard's abandonment had left a void in her life, one that I had tried desperately to fill. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's call was more than just a cruel reminder of the past. There was something sinister in his tone, something that told me this wasn't the end of it. As night fell and Ava retreated to her room, I sat alone in the living room, the ghosts of the past haunting me. Richard had moved on, had built a life without us. Why reach out now? What game was he playing? I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Richard disrupt our lives again. We had come too far to be dragged back into his twisted world. Ava and I, we were survivors, and we would face whatever came our way, together. The phone rang again, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was Richard. Taking a deep breath, I answered, ready to confront the past. What do you want, Richard? Ah, Claire, finally ready to listen. Richard's voice oozed through the phone with a patronizing tone. I'm not here for games, Richard. What do you want? I replied, my grip tightening around the phone. It's simple. I need you at the White Garden Chapel. It's for our daughter's wedding. Our daughter? Ava is in college, Richard. What are you playing at? There was a pause, and then a chuckle. Not Ava, my other daughter. You know, the one I had with her. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. He had a daughter, almost Ava's age, and he dared to drag me into this farce. You must be out of your mind if you think I'll play along with your twisted fantasies, I spat out. Come on, Claire. I thought you'd enjoy the chance to show how well you've done without me. Plus, it'll be good for Ava to see what she missed out on. His words stung, but I refused to let him see my pain. Ava hasn't missed out on anything, Richard. She's better off without a father like you. The line went silent for a moment before Richard's voice came back, colder this time. You'll regret this, Claire. I always get what I want, one way or another. The call ended abruptly, leaving me in a state of shock and anger. How dare he? After all these years, he still had the audacity to try and manipulate me. I couldn't let this go. Not this time. It was clear that Richard hadn't changed, and now he was dragging another innocent child into his web of lies. I had to protect Ava and myself from his vindictive games. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called an old friend who had become a private investigator. Tom, I need a favor. Can you find out everything about Richard's other daughter? I need to know what he's planning. Tom agreed without hesitation, understanding the urgency in my voice. Meanwhile, Ava, sensing something was amiss, confronted me. Mom, what's going on? Why are you so worried all of a sudden? I hesitated, not wanting to involve her in Richard's mess, but she deserved the truth. Ava, your father called yesterday. He claims he's getting his other daughter married and wanted me there. Ava's face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief. He's unbelievable. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out what he's up to. But I need you to promise me something, Ava. Stay out of this. I don't want you getting hurt. Ava nodded reluctantly, her eyes filled with a fire that reminded me so much of myself at her age. Over the next few days, Tom's investigation unearthed disturbing details. Richard's new family was a facade. His business was failing, and his marriage was on the rocks. The wedding was a desperate attempt to maintain appearances, and he wanted me there to further his own agenda. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act. It was time to confront Richard and end his manipulations once and for all. I decided to go to the White Garden Chapel, not to participate in his charade, but to expose it. As I drove to the chapel, my mind raced with possibilities. What would I say? How would he react? But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. I was doing this for Ava, for myself, and for the innocent daughter Richard had dragged into his deceitful world. I arrived at the chapel, steeling myself for the confrontation. It was time to face Richard and the past he represented. Today, I would finally break free from his shadow and protect my family from his destructive influence. As I stepped into the White Garden Chapel, the lavish decor couldn't mask the underlying tension in the air. Richard stood at the front, his face a mix of surprise and annoyance upon seeing me. "Claire, you actually came. How unexpected," he sneered. "I'm not here for your games, Richard. I know about your failing business and sham of a marriage. What are you really up to?" His smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. "Always so clever, aren't you? Well, since you're here, why not play along? For old time's sake. I'm not one of your pawns, Richard, and neither is our daughter. What about this other daughter of yours? Does she know about your lies?" Richard's facade of control was slipping. "You always were too nosy for your own good. Yes, my business is struggling, but this wedding will secure a deal that'll save it. All you need to do is stand there and look pretty." "Look pretty? For your business deal?" I couldn't hide my disgust. "You're using your own daughter's wedding as a business transaction? That's low, even for you." He stepped closer, his voice a menacing whisper. "You have no idea what it takes to maintain a lifestyle like mine. You were always too simple to understand." "Simple? I've built a life for Ava and me without stooping to deceit and manipulation. You're pathetic, Richard." His eyes narrowed. "Watch your mouth, Claire. You're in my world now." Just then, a young woman, presumably Richard's other daughter, approached us. Her expression was a mix of confusion and hurt. "Dad, what's going on? Who is she?" "This is Claire, an old friend. Don't mind her, she was just leaving," Richard said, attempting to regain his composure. "No, she's not just leaving," the young woman protested. "She looks upset. What did you do, Dad?" Richard's mask was finally crumbling. "Nothing, it's just business." I looked at the young woman, seeing a reflection of Ava in her. "I'm sorry you're caught up in this. Your father's not the man you think he is." "Enough, Claire," Richard barked. "Leave now, or I'll make you regret it." "I'm not afraid of you, Richard, but I won't stoop to your level. I'm leaving, but not because you told me to. I'm leaving because there's nothing here for me." As I turned to leave, Richard's voice followed me, laced with malice. "You'll pay for this, Claire, you and your daughter." Outside, the cool air did little to calm my raging thoughts. Richard's threat lingered in my mind. I knew then that this wasn't over. I had to protect Ava and expose Richard for who he truly was. Driving home, my resolve hardened. Richard had thrown down the gauntlet, and I was ready to pick it up. It was time for his reign of manipulation and deceit to end. For Ava's sake, for my sake, and for the sake of the young woman who deserved a father far better than Richard. Back at home, I relayed the day's events to Ava. Her reaction was a mix of anger and determination. "We can't let him get away with this, Mom. He's not just a liar, he's dangerous." "I know, Ava, and I have a plan. But it's risky, and I need you to trust me." Ava nodded, her eyes reflecting the fire of resolve. "Whatever it takes, Mom." Over the next few days, I pored over Richard's business dealings, thanks to some discreet inquiries by Tom. The picture that emerged was one of desperation and deceit. Richard's company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and his personal life was no better. His second marriage was crumbling, just like his first. Armed with this information, I reached out to Richard's business partners, carefully planting seeds of doubt about his stability and trustworthiness. It was a subtle campaign, but effective. Soon, whispers of Richard's impending downfall began to circulate in his social circles. Meanwhile, Ava took to social media, skillfully crafting posts that highlighted Richard's unethical practices, being careful not to mention him directly. It wasn't long before the posts went viral, adding to the growing storm around Richard. The final blow came when I anonymously tipped off a local journalist about Richard's shady dealings. The subsequent article was a damning exposé that sent ripples through the community. As Richard's world began to crumble, he became increasingly erratic. He called me one evening. His voice barely contained fury. "What have you done, Claire? You're ruining me." "I haven't done anything, Richard. You're the architect of your own downfall. You think you're so clever, but you're nothing. I'll destroy you and your precious daughter." "Threats, Richard, really? That's all you have left?" I said, my voice steady despite the chill his words sent down my spine. "You haven't seen the last of me, Claire. I'll make sure you regret this." But his threats were empty, his power waning. The community turned against him, his business partners withdrew their support, and his social standing evaporated. Richard had become a pariah, undone by his own actions. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Richard's company declared bankruptcy, and his wife filed for divorce. He tried to reach out to Ava, perhaps seeking some form of redemption, but she refused to engage with him. "You did it, Mom. You brought him down," Ava said one evening as we sat in our living room, the weight of the past months finally lifting. "We did it, Ava, together." But even as we celebrated our victory, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Richard had been a part of my life, once a source of love and happiness. It was a tragic end to a chapter that had started with so much promise. In the quiet aftermath of Richard's downfall, Ava and I found ourselves in a reflective mood. Our living room, once a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world, now felt too silent, too still. "Mom, do you think we went too far?" Ava asked one evening, her eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't sure I had. I sighed, the weight of her question heavy on my shoulders. "Richard brought this on himself, Ava. We just accelerated the inevitable." "I know, but I can't help feeling guilty. We've essentially ruined a man's life." "He ruined his own life, Ava. We just exposed the truth." I paused, my thoughts drifting. "But I understand what you're feeling. There's no joy in seeing someone's life crumble, even if they deserve it." Ava nodded, her expression somber. "What now, Mom? What do we do with all this emptiness?" "We rebuild, Ava. We fill our lives with new memories, new joys. We've been given a chance to start afresh, free from Richard's shadow." The conversation lingered in the air as we both retreated into our own thoughts. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and reflection. We focused on our business, which had thrived amidst the chaos, and on strengthening our bond, which had been tested but not broken. But just when we thought we could close the chapter on Richard, fate had one more twist in store. A knock on our door one rainy evening revealed a young woman, drenched and shivering. Richard's other daughter, the one he had used as a pawn in his twisted games. "Miss Harmon? I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Elise, Richard's daughter. I didn't know where else to go." Her appearance was a shock, but I couldn't turn her away. "Come in, Elise. You're welcome here." As Elise settled in, wrapped in a warm blanket with a cup of tea in her hands, she shared her story. Richard had abandoned her and her mother, leaving them with nothing but debts and broken promises. "I'm sorry, Elise," Ava said, her voice filled with empathy. "We didn't know about you when we set out to expose your father." Elise shook her head, a tear trailing down her cheek. "No, you did what needed to be done. I'm just lost. I don't know what to do now." "We'll help you, Elise," I said, a resolve settling in my heart. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure this out together." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We helped Elise settle her father's debts and supported her in starting a new life. It was a time of healing, not just for Elise, but for Ava and me as well. We had extended our family, found a new purpose in our shared experiences. As I watched Ava and Elise laughing together one afternoon, a sense of peace filled me. We had come full circle, from victims of Richard's deceit to architects of our own destiny. Our lives were once again our own, richer and fuller for the trials we had endured. With Elise now part of our lives, our home buzzed with a new energy. It was refreshing, yet it came with its own set of challenges. Elise, carrying the scars of her father's neglect, often found herself grappling with complex emotions. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, Elise's facade of strength crumbled. "How do you do it?" she asked, her voice quivering. "How do you move past the anger, the betrayal?" Ava reached out, taking Elise's hand in hers. "It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. For years I hated my father for abandoning us, but eventually I realized that hate was only holding me back. I want to move on, but I feel so lost," Elise confessed, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're not alone, Elise," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're part of this family now. We'll navigate this journey together." Our conversation that night was a turning point. It brought us closer, creating a bond forged from shared pain and mutual understanding. In the weeks that followed, we supported each other in ways big and small. Ava and Elise grew particularly close, finding solace in their shared experiences as daughters of the same flawed man. But just when we thought we had left the worst behind, Richard reappeared, a shadow from the past we thought we had escaped. He showed up at our doorstep one day, unannounced and unwanted. "Richard, what are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice cold. I need help," he stammered, a shadow of his former self. "I've lost everything. I have nowhere else to go." His appearance was pitiful, but I felt no sympathy. "You made your bed, Richard. Now you have to lie in it." "Please, Claire. I've changed. I realize now what I've done to you, to Ava, to Elise. I want to make amends." Elise stepped forward, her expression one of disbelief. "Make amends? After everything you've done? You abandoned us." Richard's eyes darted between us, desperation etched on his face. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm your father. Doesn't that count for something?" "No, Richard. Being a father is more than just a title. It's about being there, about love and support. You've done none of that," I said firmly. Ava stood beside me, her stance resolute. "You need to leave, Richard. There's nothing for you here." Defeated, Richard turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the fading light of the day. Watching him go, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he was finally out of our lives, and sadness for the man he could have been, the father he should have been. That night, we sat together, a family united not by blood, but by our shared experiences and newfound love for each other. We talked about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. It was a future we would face together, stronger and more resilient than ever. In the weeks following Richard's departure, a sense of calm settled over our household. Ava, Elise, and I found comfort in our routine, each day bringing us closer and healing old wounds. We were a family, not by blood, but by choice, bound by our resilience and shared experiences. One evening, as we gathered for dinner, Elise broached a subject we had all been avoiding. "I've been thinking about my dad," she said hesitantly. "I know he's done terrible things, but he's still my father. I feel like I should do something, try to help him somehow." Ava reached across the table, squeezing Elise's hand. "I understand how you feel, Elise, but remember, we can't fix him. He has to want to change, and right now, he doesn't." "I know," Elise sighed. "It's just hard to let go." "It is," I agreed, "but sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. We've all been hurt by Richard, but we can't let him define our lives." The conversation lingered in the air, a reminder of the complex emotions we all harbored. Yet it was also a testament to our strength and our ability to face difficult truths. In the days that followed, we focused on building our future. Ava excelled in her studies, her dreams of becoming a writer now within reach. Elise, with our support, enrolled in community college, determined to carve her own path. As for me, the bookstore continued to thrive, a symbol of my journey from a broken-hearted wife to a successful businesswoman and mother. But more than that, it was a place where Ava, Elise, and I could share our love for stories and dreams. One sunny afternoon, as we rearranged the bookstore, Ava looked up from a stack of books, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Mom, Elise, I've been thinking. We've all been through so much, and we've come out stronger. What if we share our story? Write a book about it?" Elise's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea, Ava. Our story could inspire others who are going through tough times." I nodded, feeling a surge of pride. "I think it's a wonderful idea. Let's do it. Let's tell our story, our way." And so we began. Nights were spent around the kitchen table, sharing memories, laughter, and tears as we penned our story. It was a cathartic experience, one that brought us even closer. Months later, as I held the first copy of our book, I felt a sense of accomplishment and closure. We had turned our pain into something beautiful, something that could potentially help others. As we prepared for the book launch, I looked at Ava and Elise, my heart full of love and gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and now we were ready to embrace the sunshine. "Our story doesn't end here," I said, smiling at them. "This is just the beginning, a new chapter in our lives." Ava and Elise smiled back, their eyes shining with hope and excitement for the future. Together, we stepped out into the world, ready to share our story and start a new journey. A journey filled with promise, love, and the unbreakable bond of a family forged in fire and tempered by time.